the first time at Texas Tech coming this fall. What to expect? We've got the scoop coming up on today's Locked On Texas Tech.
Are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Texas Tech, a member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so be sure that you are subscribed to our channel if you have not already. I'm Ryan Mainville. He's Emery Lida. Today we are talking Jaylon Tyson. We've been doing these season reviews for guys. We still got one left on Daniel Bacho, who we'll have coming at you later this week likely, but Jaylon Tyson is definitely a guy that I'm really excited to dig into because obviously there's a lot of backstory here with Tyson and the Red Raiders, and then coming back last season, sitting on the bench, getting to redshirt in practice for essentially the rest of last season. It's an exciting story, and I feel like a lot of Red Raider fans are excited about him. And yet, to some degree, I still feel like he's flying under the radar when it comes to the mix of next year's team. But Jaylon Tyson, man, there's a lot to like here. A guy with a long history with the Red Raiders, but he's back in Lubbock. He'll be there next year, and there's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I mean, Tyson's someone that obviously was committed to Tech before Chris Beard left the program. He's someone that was a high four-star recruit pretty much anywhere you looked. He's someone that really was hyped up quite a bit before he decommitted as someone that Tech was going to be able to rely on for a couple of years. Went to Texas, obviously high expectations there. Just didn't quite fit, and you could really tell from the get-go that for whatever reason, Beard and company just did not want to utilize him. Well, he only got 14 minutes as the most he played, and that was on the first game of the year against Houston Baptist. He played a grand total of 1 minute against any sort of legitimate competition. That was against Gonzaga. So just could not find a way into the rotation. Certainly someone with a lot of natural talent. I mean, you look at the jump shot being extremely crisp. His ability as a creator is something that it's kind of been mixed reviews. I think a lot of people have kind of differing opinions on that, but certainly it's something that he has shown flashes of self-creation. And just in general, he's a player that you really, the one word that really, or one sort of phrase that I would use to describe him is high feel. And I know that sometimes that gets used a little bit too much in basketball circles, but Tyson's a guy that has sort of a really high basketball IQ. On defense, it allows him to kind of get away with some of his athletic shortcomings. Offensively, I think it allows him to really move well off the ball. And I think that if you're looking at some of the things Tech struggled with last year in terms of shooting and being able to move and cut well off the ball, that's something that Tyson can produce really well. And so for me, I look at this and I look at what Tyson was able to do in high school and what it, by all accounts, it seems like he is as a player. And this is someone that if he can live up to his potential, he can fit exactly what Tech needs out of a wing and can be someone that you can really plug and play alongside a variety of players. I think that's something, the versatility that he provides from a positional standpoint is really important.
Yeah, and I know everybody likes to dunk on Texas, and it is fun, but it legitimately is really confusing when you think about the lack of minutes that he played last season. I mean, what Texas really needed at points of last season were athletic wings that could shoot the ball. And that was Jaylon Tyson. He was right there on the bench and yet never really got that opportunity that it felt like he could have broken into in the rotation. And it's even more surprising when you look at that 14-minute game that he played against Houston Baptist in the opener. Obviously, you know, it's Houston Baptist. It was a murder of a game, but Tyson scored 11 points on 5 of 5 shooting. He had 3 boards, 1 steal, 1 block, and no turnovers. And I feel like that's just exactly the kind of player that he is. He's going to put points on the board. He's going to do it at an efficient clip, and he's going to play good defense. And so, honestly, I know that has been kind of weaponized by Texas fans against Texas Tech for landing Tyson. And it's like, hey, this guy couldn't crack minutes here, and he was exactly what we needed. So he's definitely not as good as you make it seem. But like, I just legitimately can't think of another way to paint it other than bad roster management whenever you think about Tyson and the way that he just failed to get put on the court last season. It legitimately is baffling to me.
Yeah, I think any Texas fan that kind of reaches out with that, the counter would be, well, would you rather have Brock Cunningham coming to Texas Tech and have him playing 20 minutes a night and picking up more fouls than points? Like, I just look at Texas's shortcomings as a roster last year and the fact that they didn't have any real wings in the rotation. Like, I mean, you were having to rely on Jace Fevers and whatever's remaining of him as a player, and I feel like he's someone that's kind of had to deal with injuries over his career. But you're relying on him to be really your only source of wings. Obviously, you had guys like Disu and Timmy Allen, and obviously Trey Mitchell before whatever happened there went down. So I mean, you had those guys, but generally speaking, like they were all better off as bigs. You had obviously Bishop trying to play in kind of a three at times. Like it just did not go very well. And so like for them to not play Jaylon Tyson and rely on Brock Cunningham as your only wing, like that's a them problem. And I think Jaylon Tyson is a player. Certainly, he's got a little bit of shortcomings athletically. I would say his lateral quickness isn't quite what you would expect from a really versatile wing, but he makes up for it in other areas. I think his ball skills allow him to be someone that offensively can play a variety of different roles, and then defensively as well, he's got really good anticipation. So, like fundamentally, he's a player that by all means should be in the rotation, should be playing heavy minutes. And I mean, let's not act like Texas was perfect in their roster management in the first place, or someone that had Devin Askew in the rotation. I mean, that's kind of a mistake on its own part. They had roster shortcomings from a wing standpoint, like I mentioned. They ended up kind of going around and not figuring out what they were doing with the big lineup until really late in the season. And as well as that, even with the guards, you had Andrew Jones coming off the bench for a good portion of the year. Like, it's just not, they weren't able to really find their rotation in general. So for Tyson to not crack the rotation in the like 10 games that he was present for, I don't find that to be an indictment against him at all. I think it's more of just he couldn't figure things out. Texas couldn't figure things out. It just wasn't meant to be. And Texas Tech is getting a really good talent in Jaylon Tyson. They've had a really good talent by all accounts in practice. It's looked like he's been a really good player. Obviously, has a recruiting pedigree coming to his name before then. So like, there's a lot to like about Jaylon Tyson, and the fact that he didn't get minutes at Texas isn't something that concerns me too much.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've heard coming out of early practices so far on Tyson, but naturally, he's probably the Texas, or without a doubt, he's the Texas Tech athlete that I've watched in high school more than anybody else. He's from Plano, Texas. I'm from Plano, Texas. So naturally, I got in the gym quite often to see him play at John Paul. And what I picked up on in those probably dozen games that I got to see him play live, it is just his natural ability to score at all three levels. I mean, it's really, really rare what he can do in that kind of offense. A guy that can shoot the three, he's got a good, effective 3-point shot. He's got the ability to put the ball down on the court and go use a screen or use some sort of dribble move to create space in the mid range. And then I think it's an area of an improvement for him, but he's got enough capabilities to handle the ball and get the ball to the rim. And so the three-level scoring ability for Jaylon Tyson is by far, I think, the skill set that bodes the best for him to earn a role at Texas Tech next season. And also the thing that I think truly can make him a very, very different offensive player than Texas Tech has seen in a minute, man.
Yeah, for sure. His ball handling ability, obviously, I think he has a little bit of room to improve as a driver, and certainly the natural burst is going to be something that he has to work through a little bit. But I mean, Tyson's a guy that offensively has just so much versatility and potential to his game. Like that's something Tech hasn't really seen a lot of out of a wing. I mean, obviously you have McCullough and Shannon and what they provided as ball handlers, but certainly they have both kind of lacked the shooting ability at all three levels that what you could say a guy like Tyson has. And in general, he's someone that Tech fans have had a long time to sort of look through his high school tape. I mean, at this point, we've known about him for a very long time. Obviously, Ryan's seen more of him than probably just about anyone in Tech circles. And for another thing is I just want to say that we're getting to the point where the Plano, Texas connection in this podcast and talking about Jaylon Tyson is about as much as my pre-Duke game mentioning of the UNC Duke game in Cameron Indoor. But regardless, I mean, Jaylon Tyson's a guy that has a lot of talent, someone that has been fun to watch on tape. Certainly haven't been able to see him in person like a certain other co-host has, but I think that Tyson's ability in general offensively is going to be a huge addition, because if you look at what Tech has on the roster right now, one of the shortcomings outside of Tyson is at the wing spot in terms of just making offensive production. That's something that you're going to have to kind of replace this year without McCullough or without Shannon coming back. And so to have a guy like Tyson that can score at all three levels, that can play well off the ball, it's also a good on-ball scorer as well at times. I mean, that's something you're always going to want on your team.
Yeah, shout out to Tyler Owens as well, new Red Raider DB out of Plano, Texas, man. The pipeline is strong and it is fresh. All right, I'm hearing some really exciting things about Jaylon Tyson coming out of practice. We'll get into those, but first, a quick word from our sponsors. Thanks again for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Here talking Jaylon Tyson, who's obviously been within the program for a couple of months now. Transferred in, I believe, in January after those 8 games that he played with Texas, and then obviously had to sit on the bench and watch the team play, but he was active in practices and in the weight room, and now he is getting into some limited practice action. Obviously, Texas Tech only has a couple of guys in the building right now that were in the program last year, but early word on Jaylon Tyson from practice, really the number one thing that I continue to hear is the ability to create his own shot. And that's been primarily the feedback there has been at the 3-point level and also at the mid-range. And so it's sounding like it's a consistent thing for him to just create shots with his size and his ability to handle the ball well and effectively without turning it over. He puts the ball down and he makes good decisions when he does it. I think that's something that should get Texas Tech fans really, really excited, because when you begin to think about guys that have had this in their bag over the last couple of seasons, I mean, outside of true point guards, the list is really limited. Like Jarrett Culver was really good at it. Jamias Ramsey was also good at it, although he was a little more turnover prone than I think a lot of Red Raiders would have preferred. But Davide Moretti to a degree, and even then, it's very limited. And so Jaylon Tyson and the feedback of being able to score at that mid-range in 3-point level after putting the ball on the court and creating his own shot is something that has been passed on with a lot of excitement, and I think it bodes really, really well for him when you begin to consider his role for next year.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a really short list of guys at Tech that were both efficient 3-point shooters and could create their own 3-point shot effectively. I mean, Culver obviously had the shooting slump in his 2019 year. I think in 2018 and early parts of 19, he was more reliable as a shooter. Obviously, you have guys like Moretti and Ramsey, but I think both of those guys kind of had their shortcomings in creating their own shot, or they were too turnover prone to be sort of reliable guards in the case of Ramsey. And so, like, you're looking down the list. I mean, you could say Kyler Edwards, but the year where Kyler Edwards was tasked with being more of a ball handler was the year where he shot 30% from 3. His best seasons came when he was almost exclusively a catch and shoot guy. So, like, if you're looking at guys that really created their shot well from 3-point range, you could say, well, Jarrett Culver is one of them. But again, he had that massive slump in the year where he's had a high usage. And then you have Naeem Stevenson is another one that maybe comes to mind as someone that could create his own shot and was pretty efficient from 3. But even then, like, no one off the top of my head as a Tech wing in the last 5 or 6 years has both been efficient from 3-point range and also been able to create their own shot effectively. And I think based off of what you're hearing from practice, based off of what we've seen from Tyson, that ability to create from the 2 highest levels is something that he really has in his bag. We know we can trust him as a shooter. We know the ball handling might need a little bit of work, but regardless, I mean, that's something that he has in his arsenal. And when you have a wing that has the ability to create his own shot from deep and shoot it efficiently, then that really opens up your offense, because that's someone that doesn't have to necessarily be an exclusive catch and shoot guy. Like, I mean, we've talked about Buzo a lot on this pod, but we can agree that one of his shortcomings was probably that he's not really much of a self-shot creator, at least at the college level. Tyson gives you that. Now suddenly you're talking about someone that can be an elite level catch and shoot guy as well as being an above average 3-point shooter off the dribble. You add both of those things together, it's a really dangerous offensive weapon. And just given what he can do from a pull-up standpoint, given his cutting ability, just in general, like, he's a player that offensively has just so many different values. I think defensively as well is something that if you look at what people maybe had these conceptions about him about, oh, like he's not overly athletic for a wing and that he's maybe going to struggle defensively. I'd say just watching the tape and then hearing just little bits and pieces is his ability and anticipation and his ability to kind of be a really smart defensive player is going to help him out a lot. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you look at what Tech has really done well with in years past with wings is guys that are really smart, really have good basketball IQ and can switch well and not have communication breakdowns. And I think that's something that Tyson, just hearing what we've heard and obviously seeing what we see in high school, you see a lot of that potential with him as a player and just being able to switch effectively, defensively, be able to sort of guard pretty much any position. And so I think that's something that looking at Tyson's game, I'm really excited for because defensively, obviously, it's a lot more of an unknown heading into Tech, but I'm optimistic, just like I'm really optimistic about what he can do offensively.
Yeah, one other thing I'm consistently hearing good things about is his ability to make good reads on passes. And so I think this really goes hand in hand with what you were saying about the basketball IQ. And it's important to differentiate this between just natural playmaking ability. I wouldn't bet on Tyson being a high usage playmaker next year in terms of looking like a true point guard. I think the development is there for it to happen to some degree, but right now, essentially the buzz is that when he is on the attack and he gets the ball inside the arc and he stretches the defense, he's able to make a good read to the open guy. And I think that's something that Texas Tech will sorely need next year. And this is the importance of, again, talking about a guy who's more than a catch and shoot guy. Right now, the Texas Tech roster has landed a number of really talented catch and shoot guys, and they may add another one this week. But to have a guy like Tyson who can put the ball on the court and then force the defense and create that gravity, it's really, really helpful for you. And I'll say this, and it's going to sound like a little bit more brash than I intended to, but I think it's fair. TJ Shannon's driving ability last season could not be replicated by anybody. When he was on, he was the best driver on the team. But he also had a tendency to get tunnel vision and go full speed at the rim and either make a bad pass, turn the ball over, or draw a foul. And so having a guy like Tyson who can kind of catch his breath, obviously he doesn't have the burst that TJ does. I think he's got a little bit more left hand usage, or I guess in this hand, weak hand usage since TJ was a lefty. But man, to be able to look, slow down, and find the right read is a really, really valuable trait. And especially for a guy his age, to be playing that controlled is good news, especially in May.
Yeah, I think that Jaylon Tyson's ability as a driver, it's a completely different ability than what TJ Shannon offers. I mean, Shannon, natural burst, we didn't really see it a lot last year just because of the back injury and sort of how that limited him. But when he was on and when he was healthy, his burst is something that really very few wings in the country have that level of driving ability. And so holistically as a driver, yeah, you would want to take Shannon just because of his ability to get to the rim effectively. And it's really good and flexible finisher. I'm not sure that Tyson possesses the same abilities. Obviously, from a burst standpoint, he's definitely not quite on the same stratosphere. And then as well as that finishing, we haven't really seen much of him at the college level, so that's kind of hard to tell. But man, I mean, looking at how Tyson's able to read plays and make efficient passes off the drives, I think that's something that you're going to really see a benefit from. I'm a little bit skeptical of how much he's going to be used in that capacity as a driver. I certainly think that maybe you might see, especially early on in the season, him just be more of a catch and shoot. And when he does get opportunities to handle the ball, it's more of sort of focusing on getting into pull-up opportunities or potentially just being a facilitator on the outside. But certainly Tyson's a guy that can have that level of ability to pass the ball well off of drives and can make high-level reads, especially on guys that are cutters. And so that's the biggest thing with Tyson is it's his ability as a high field guy that can really serve a whole lot of different purposes. He can be a catch and shoot dude. He can be someone that can make pull up threes. He's someone that if he's given the opportunity to drive, we know that he has the potential to be a good level passer off of those drives. And just in general, it comes down to how Tech wants to use him and how much he can get involved in the lineup. But certainly offensively, he's got a lot of the skill sets that Tech might have struggled with last year. And I think that if you look at what he can add to the team, it certainly outweighs some of his negatives and some of the things that we haven't seen yet.
All right, let's talk about what his potential role could be for next season. But first, a quick word from BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, odds, podcasts, and reviews for all of the different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Well, I hope that I'm not missing anybody here. Been off of Twitter for about a week now, and so I'm kind of having to keep my ear to the ground a little bit more than usual. But projecting the starting five right now is pretty difficult. But you got to think Davian Harmon obviously gets a guard starting spot. Um, then Demarion Williams maybe, and then I'd probably go Jaylon Tyson at the three, and then O'Banner and Amac to load off your front court. So that means that right now I'm projecting a guy that played 8 games last season in college basketball to start for Texas Tech. Emory, am I a crazy Plano homer, or is there good reason to believe that Jaylon Tyson is due for big minutes on this team?
Well, as of right now, who else is the alternative to putting or to Tyson at the three? Like, you've got Lamar Washington, who literally didn't play any college games last year. You could slide Williams over to the three and put Pop Isaacs at the one or the two. Obviously, if Malik Wilson comes back, that's another potential capability, another guy at the guard. You're not going to want to run a three big lineup and run like Bacho at the five and O'Banner at the four, or Amac at the four and O'Banner at the three. That'd just be ridiculous. So as of now, it looks like it's kind of just a process of elimination and putting Tyson at the three. And certainly, I mean, you could maybe say like, well, Robert Jennings, but Jennings by all accounts is a pretty massive project. So it seems kind of crazy to suggest that he would start from day one. So it sort of looks like it's going to be Jaylon Tyson almost up by default. And obviously, I mean, Tech looks like they're going to potentially add another piece in the next week or so. They've got a couple more guys that they're looking into that would be sort of in that three, in the 2 to 3 role. But certainly, I mean, Tyson, given his size, given his potential on both ends of the court, especially offensively and the versatility he provides, to me, he's the easy answer to the issues at the three. I'm not going to completely pin him in as the starter. I think that there's still a little bit up in the air in terms of who all comes in and what sort of their role is. But certainly, I mean, Tyson's got the pedigree to be able to start. And obviously, we've seen the talent. We've heard about what he's done in practice. And so there's no reason why he can't start. And I don't think experience is going to be too much of a hindrance when A, the other options are just as inexperienced in a lot of cases, and B, they might not fit quite as well and wouldn't have that experience playing in a certain role as sort of like a wing in the case of like a Demarion Williams. So just think it's going to be hard to really say that Tyson isn't going to be a starter just given what we know right now.
So all eyes are on Dominic Welch right now. Obviously, the St. Bonaventure transfer, I think he's on an OV at Texas Tech right now, actually, but a guy that plays kind of that shooting guard, wing type role. He's built kind of like Tyson, got a little bit more weight on him, but a guy that would definitely fill that wing spot. If he comes in, obviously there's still a lot to be decided, but what's kind of the contention or maybe the difference maker between those two and them being able to carve out a role even as a starter on this team, whereas I think we've already seen that starting jobs in Mark Adams' system is pretty much vanity.
Yeah, I think Welch is a lot closer to like a Brandon Francis type of body, at least in sort of his size and stature. Kind of, he certainly looks more built than what Tyson is right now. And then Tyson, I think it has a little bit of a height advantage on him. But certainly, if you're looking at fundamentals, it's kind of Welch has a lot of experience in hand over what Tyson has. And obviously, you have a 4-year sample of him being a 37+% 3-point shooter and being an efficient scorer at the college level. So it's going to be hard to sort of deny that level of experience. But also, Tyson has the versatility in hand to really be a potential difference maker. And I think that Welch does as well in the sense that you know what he can provide. You know what he's brought to the table. You know that he's a plus shooter. I'd argue he's a pretty good defender from the limited amount of tape that I've seen. You could say that his stature is certainly something that he's not going to be a limited or a liability defensively, because he's no shorter than a lot of the wings we've seen Tech run at the 3 in years past. So I'm optimistic about Welch, but that's a different podcast session for a different day. But between the two of them, I would say that it's really just going to come down to how much is Tyson's experience going to weigh against him, and also how much do you really trust Tyson as a creator? Because if you trust him a lot and you really buy into his ability to hit those pull-ups and trust him as a driver, then I think that sort of brings his potential beyond what Welch can provide. Because Welch is not going to be someone that you're going to rely on a ton as a ball handler, just from what I've seen on tape, but he's someone that obviously you trust a lot as a shooter. But if you're not going to trust Tyson in those roles, then you would have to say that the experienced guy in Welch is probably going to have the upper hand just in terms of positional battles. But again, that's something that's a long way down the road in terms of just seeing. First off, you have to get Welch in the program. Second off, you have to see how he practices and what sort of role fits him best. And third off, you have to make sort of the last minute discussion about playing time. And then even then, I mean, like you mentioned, starting really kind of irrelevant. You're going to have guys in the rotation. They're going to get subbed out after 2 minutes and come back in after 4, either way. Like, it's not going to make a huge difference. So I'm not too concerned about that. I think just getting Welch on board first is going to be a priority. And then you can sort of worry about how to allocate minutes and who ends up getting in the starting role later on once you get to that bridge.
If there's one factor or trait of Jaylon Tyson's game that has the biggest potential to swing his possible role for next season, what would you say it is?
Ball handling. If he's able to be a ball handler at the wing that can be an initiator and be able to drive, I think that the driving ability is, I think, the most important singular trait that you can have. Because if he's able to drive well and Tech trusts him to do that, and he can create well off the drive and not turn the ball over too much, then suddenly you're talking about an offensive player that's a 3-level scorer that can hit pull-ups, that can play off the ball, that can also be an effective driver and distributor. Like, that's about as complete of an offensive player as you're going to find on this program. So if he can be able to drive the ball effectively, that solves a lot of the questions you have about him. And if he doesn't, then there's always going to be that limitation. And you can utilize him as an off-ball player, but that sort of puts him more into the Marion Williams, the Welch tier guys that are just going to be sort of your elite level catch and shoot guys. And in Tyson's case, obviously the shot has a little bit of question marks around it just because we haven't seen much of it at the college level. But I think the driving ability is what really allows him to be set apart from other wings of similar size and similar stature.
Yeah, driving specifically was going to be mine, but for the sake of differentiation, I'll go with either defense or dribble, drive, pull up shots. And I feel like that one's a little too easy because from what I've seen, he's so good at it. And obviously it'll have to translate at the collegiate level, but man, that shot looks really, really good in person. But I think there's room for improvement on his lateral speed on defense and then his strength. I think that he's got to make sure that he doesn't get pushed around or bullied around by some of these other bigger wings or even bigger guards. Then he's obviously got to survive down low when the Texas Tech defense does inevitably switch. But yeah, I think if he is driving consistently and effectively and he's playing good defense, it's really difficult to think about him not being one of the 6, 7 best players on this team. Like pretty easily, probably even top 5.
I mean, 6 or 7 best players, you're basically saying he's going to be an integral part of the rotation. And I think there's an avenue, even if the driving isn't quite there, for him to be a top 6 player on this team. I think if you add in the driving ability, then the ceiling for him is being a top 3 or 4 player on this roster. I don't think that that's excessive, because if you look at the other guys on the roster, all have some form of limitations that I feel like is going to be a hindrance, at least offensively. I mean, obviously, Kevin O'Banner, we saw last year, the shot creation and the self-creation is just simply not there. And we have a 4-year sample of that being the case. Obviously, AMAC, I have questions about the three-point shooting. I certainly think his passing could use some work as well. Obviously, you've got Davion Harmon, who's kind of is what he is, kind of a jack-of-all-trades master, a non-offensive player at this point. You've got Demarion Williams, who kind of struggles to create for himself at times. I mean, like, in general, all of these players offensively have some kind of limitation. Tyson's kind of potential, if the driving is there, is going to be someone that, yeah, certainly he's not going to have the burst of a guy like TJ Shannon, but the burst in that case would be passable. The shot making could be really elite. And I think if all of those things come together, offensively at least, he could be one of your top two players, and defensively, I think he'll be passable enough for it to not make a huge negative impact.
All right, well, that's the scoop on Jaylon Tyson. So thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Highly recommend that you subscribe to our feed wherever you get podcasts, and then go subscribe to our YouTube channel where we have exclusive video content. Be sure to follow Emery on Twitter at eracer41, and then follow the official Locked On Texas Tech Twitter page at Locked On TTU to get notified whenever a new episode goes live. Until then, thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Big 12. Get all of your daily Big 12 news in less than 30 minutes with Big 12 expert Josh Neighbors. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow.